How does a single joke at Sunday dinner become the final straw for a marriage that looked perfect online? I should have known something was different when Rowan set his wine glass down with that particular precision he used at work. The same careful movement he made when reviewing compliance violations that could end careers. But I was riding high that evening, basking in the warm glow of the Lintott family's anniversary dinner. Lucille had outdone herself with the roast. Peter was telling stories about his construction days, and the whole family was gathered around their mahogany dining table like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Even Jasper had managed to charm his way into an invitation, sitting across from me with that knowing smirk that always made me feel like we shared some delicious secret. I'm Vireya Lintott, 34 years old, and I've never been one to bite my tongue. My friends at the marketing firm always said that's what made me so good at my job. I could cut through the corporate nonsense and tell clients exactly what they needed to hear. Rowan used to love that about me, or at least I thought he did. He'd laugh when I'd roast some pretentious neighbor or take down a rude server with surgical precision. That night, I was feeling particularly witty. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was Jasper's encouraging glances, but when Lucille brought up Rowan's recent promotion to senior compliance officer, I saw my opening. Oh yes, our little Rowan finally catching up to where he should have been years ago, I said with a bright smile, gesturing with my wine glass. I have to admit, I was surprised they gave him that much responsibility. But I guess everyone grows up eventually, right? The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. 8 family members, Lucille, Peter, Rowan's 3 siblings with their spouses, and little Maya, all froze mid-chew. Even 7-year-old Maya seemed to sense something was wrong, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth as she looked between her parents with those 2 knowing eyes children develop when they've witnessed too much tension. Jasper's smirk widened, and he took a long sip of wine. Vireya always keeps it real, he said, his tone suggesting he found my honesty refreshing. Most wives just pretend everything's perfect. But nobody laughed. Lucille's warm smile faded into something polite and strained. Peter set down his fork entirely and cleared his throat. Rowan's sister Emma exchanged a quick glance with her husband, while his brother David suddenly became very interested in cutting his meat into precise, uniform pieces. And Rowan just sat there, his compliance officer mask sliding into place. That calm, analytical expression he wore when someone was about to get fired for violating federal regulations. He set his wine glass down, not dropped, not slammed, but placed with the deliberate care of someone documenting evidence. "Excuse me," he said quietly, standing from the table. "I need to use the restroom." He walked away with measured steps, and I felt the first flutter of unease in my stomach. But I pushed it down, taking another sip of wine and trying to salvage the mood. "You know how sensitive he gets," I said to the table with a laugh that sounded forced, even to my own ears. "I'm just keeping him humble. That's what good wives do, right?" Nobody responded. Maya had stopped eating entirely and was drawing invisible patterns on her plate with her finger. Lucille busied herself refilling water glasses that were already full. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner and the distant sound of a toilet flushing. But Rowan didn't come back. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. "Should someone check on him?" Emma finally asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm sure he's fine," I said, but my confidence was wavering. Probably just needed a moment to collect himself. Jasper leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered by the tension. "Some people just can't handle honest feedback," he said. "It's actually pretty healthy for a relationship to have that kind of openness." Peter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is it?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in construction management. "I always thought respect was pretty important too." The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but before I could respond, Rowan reappeared in the doorway. 12 minutes had passed, I know because I'd been watching the clock, my anxiety growing with each tick. He looked different, calmer if that was possible, like he'd made some kind of decision. His eyes met mine briefly, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something final. "Sorry about that," he said, settling back into his chair as if nothing had happened. "Where were we?" The rest of the dinner passed in stilted conversation about safe topics. The weather, Maya's art class, Peter's plans for the garden. Rowan participated normally, even smiled at his father's jokes, but he didn't look at me again. Not once. When we finally said our goodbyes, I watched him hug his parents with unusual intensity. Lucille held him a moment longer than usual, her hand rubbing his back the way she probably had when he was Maya's age. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she whispered, but her voice carried in the quiet foyer. Rowan squeezed her hand and managed a smile. "I will be, Mom. I will be." The drive home was silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional ping of my phone. I kept glancing at Rowan, trying to read his expression in the glow of passing streetlights, but his face remained perfectly neutral. It was unnerving, like being married to a stranger. "Look, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you," I finally said as we pulled into our apartment complex. "You know I was just teasing, right? Everyone knows I don't mean anything by it." "I know," he replied, his voice flat and emotionless. "Your family understands. They know that's just how I am. I keep things light, keep everyone honest. It's not personal." "I know. So we're okay." "We're fine, Vireya." But we weren't fine. I could feel it in the careful way he hung up his jacket, in the deliberate space he maintained between us as we got ready for bed. When I tried to initiate our usual Sunday night routine, he claimed he was tired and turned away, leaving me staring at the back of his head in the dark. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that while I'd been lying there mentally replaying the dinner and convincing myself that everyone would forget about it by morning, Rowan was wide awake beside me, his mind working with the methodical precision that had made him one of the youngest senior compliance officers in his company's history. I also didn't know that during those 12 minutes in his parents' bathroom, he hadn't been sick or collecting himself. He'd been in Peter's home office, using the landline to call his attorney's emergency number. "Tom, it's Rowan Lintott. I need to schedule that appointment we discussed." "Yes, it happened again. Tonight, in front of my entire family. I have it recorded. Monday morning, 7 a.m. works perfectly." While I slept, Rowan worked. He sat at our kitchen table with his laptop, a cup of coffee growing cold beside him as he opened a password-protected file he'd been maintaining for 14 months. The file was organized with the same systematic approach he used for corporate investigations: dates, times, locations, witnesses present, severity ratings on a scale of 1 to 10. The Sunday dinner incident would be logged as number 23. Each entry was meticulously documented. The Christmas party, where I'd joked about his dancing in front of his colleagues. December 15th, 2022, 8:47 p.m., severity level 6, 12 witnesses. The barbecue where I'd suggested he needed a cookbook for beginners because his grilling was ambitious for someone with his skill level. July 4th, 2023, 6:23 p.m., severity level 4, 8 witnesses, including his boss. The birthday dinner, where I'd presented him with a participation trophy for trying his best at adulting. August 12th, 2023, 7:15 p.m., severity level 8, 15 witnesses, including his parents. Every incident was cross-referenced with his therapy receipts. Dr. Martinez had been treating him for anxiety and depression for over a year, and Rowan had been careful to document each session, each prescription, each sleepless night that followed my public jokes. The pen recorder he'd started carrying in his jacket pocket 3 months ago had captured Sunday's dinner perfectly. The audio file was already uploaded to a secure cloud server, along with the others. His attorney had advised him to document everything, and Rowan had followed that advice with the thoroughness of a man who understood that details could make or break a case. As dawn broke over the city, Rowan finally closed his laptop and headed for the shower. He had a 7 a.m. appointment to keep, and he wanted to look professional when he filed for divorce. I woke up around 8 to find his side of the bed cold and empty. The shower was running, and I could hear him moving around with his usual Monday morning efficiency. I checked my phone and smiled at the notifications. Several friends had liked my Instagram story from the night before, the one where I'd captioned a photo of the dinner table with "Keeping hubby humble, chacho marriage humor, chacho real wife." Jasper had been one of the first to respond. "You're so refreshing." Most people are too fake to be honest about their relationships. I was still scrolling through the positive responses when Rowan emerged from the bathroom, already dressed in his best suit. He looked like he was heading to an important meeting, which struck me as odd for a regular Monday. "Big day at the office?" I asked, trying to inject some normalcy into the morning. "You could say that," he replied, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "I have some important business to take care of." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like a goodbye than a good morning, and left without his usual coffee or breakfast. I heard his car start and pull away, and something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling aside. Rowan was probably just being dramatic, the way he always was when his feelings got hurt. He'd cool off, realize I was just being myself, and things would go back to normal. They always did. I had no idea that at that very moment he was sitting in his attorney's office, sliding a thick manila envelope across a polished desk. "This should be everything you need," Rowan said quietly. "Audio files, witness statements from family members, therapy records, a complete timeline of incidents. I want this filed today." Tom Bradley, a family law attorney with 25 years of experience, opened the envelope and whistled low under his breath. "This is thorough, very thorough. You understand that once we file this, there's no going back?" "I understand," Rowan replied. "I also understand that I have grounds for a fault-based divorce in this state, and I intend to pursue every legal remedy available to me." "The audio recordings alone," Tom shook his head. "Rowan, I've seen a lot of cases, but this level of documentation is extraordinary. When did you start planning this?" "I didn't start planning anything," Rowan said. "I started protecting myself. There's a difference." Monday evening arrived with the kind of false normalcy that makes you think you've imagined the cracks in your foundation. I'd spent the day at work fielding compliments on my Instagram post, with several colleagues praising my authentic approach to marriage. Sarah from Accounts Receivable had even stopped by my desk to say she wished she could be as real with her husband as I was with mine. "Most of us just pretend everything's perfect," she'd said, echoing Jasper's words from the night before. "But you actually keep it honest. That's so healthy." I'd basked in the validation, my confidence restored. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself that Rowan's morning stiffness had been nothing more than wounded pride, the kind of temporary bruise that comes with being married to someone who doesn't sugarcoat reality. But when I walked into our apartment, something felt off. It was too quiet, too still. Rowan's jacket wasn't on its usual hook, his work bag wasn't by the door, and the mail was still scattered on the counter where I'd left it that morning. "Rowan," I called out, checking the kitchen, the bedroom, his home office. Nothing. His car wasn't in the parking lot either. He finally came home at nearly 9 p.m., carrying takeout from that Thai place he liked. His movements were precise, controlled, like he was following some internal script. "I brought dinner," he said, setting the containers on the counter. "Pad Thai, the way you like it." "Where have you been?" I was starting to worry. "Tying up some loose ends," he replied, opening cabinets with mechanical efficiency, "making sure everything's in order." There was something in his tone, a finality that made my chest tight. I watched him move around our kitchen like he was memorizing it, touching familiar objects, with the careful attention of someone saying goodbye. Rowan, about last night. You don't need to explain, he said, not looking at me. I understand exactly what happened. Do you? Because I feel like you're making this into something bigger than it was. It was just a joke, honey. Everyone knows that. Your family knows that. He stopped moving then, his hands resting on the counter. When he turned to face me, his expression was eerily calm. Do they know that, Vireya? Because my mother called me today. So did Emma. And David. They all wanted to make sure I was okay because, in their words, what you said wasn't funny. It was cruel. The words hit me like a slap. They're just being oversensitive. You know how your family is. They take everything so seriously. They don't understand our dynamic. Our dynamic. He repeated the phrase like he was testing its weight. Is that what we're calling it? Yes. We joke around. We keep each other grounded. That's what couples do. That's what makes us work. Rowan nodded slowly, as if I'd just confirmed something important. I see. And when you posted that Instagram story last night, the one about keeping me humble, that was part of our dynamic too. My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about the post, forgotten that he followed my social media. It was just for fun. People liked it. They thought it was refreshing. I'm sure they did. His voice was still maddeningly calm. Tell me, when you were posting that, did you think about how I might feel seeing my wife mock me online to hundreds of strangers? It wasn't mocking. What would you call it then? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Because looking at his face, really looking at it, I could see something I'd been missing for months. Not anger, not hurt, but exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying a weight too heavy for too long. I would call it being honest, I finally said, but the word sounded weak even to me. Honest. He smiled then, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on his face. You know what's interesting about honesty, Vireya? It works both ways. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and headed for our bedroom. I followed, watching as he pulled a small suitcase from the closet and began packing with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. What are you doing? I'm going to stay at my parents' house for a few days, he said, folding shirts with mechanical efficiency. I think we both need some space to process things. Process what? Rowan, you're scaring me. This is all because of one little comment at dinner. He stopped packing and looked at me with something that might have been pity. One comment. That's really how you see it. That's what it was. December 15th, Christmas party. You told my entire department that I danced like someone having a medical emergency. July 4th, barbecue at the Hendersons. You gave me a children's cookbook in front of our neighbors because my grilling was ambitious for my skill level. August 12th, my birthday dinner. You presented me with a participation trophy for trying my best at adulting in front of 15 people, including my parents. The specificity of his recall was unsettling. The dates, the exact phrases. It was like he'd been keeping a ledger. You remember all of that? I remember everything, Vireya. Every joke, every laugh at my expense, every time you've made me feel small in front of people who matter to me. 23 incidents in 14 months. Would you like me to continue? The number hit me like a physical blow. 23? Had it really been that many? Those weren't. I wasn't trying to make you feel small. I was just being myself. You used to like that about me. I used to think it was confidence, he said, zipping the suitcase closed. I used to think you were just comfortable enough with me to be playful, but somewhere along the way, playful became cruel, and I stopped being your husband and started being your target. That's not true, isn't it? He turned to face me fully. When was the last time you said something nice about me in public? When was the last time you built me up instead of tearing me down? When was the last time you treated me like someone you actually liked, let alone loved? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Because I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember the last time I'd praised him to friends, the last time I'd bragged about his promotion or his kindness, or any of the things that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. "I do love you," I whispered. "I know you do," he said, and his voice was infinitely sad. "But love without respect isn't enough, Vireya, and I can't keep living with someone who thinks humiliating me is a form of affection." He picked up his suitcase and headed for the door. I followed, panic rising in my throat. "Don't go, please. We can work this out. I'll be more careful about what I say. I'll think before I speak." He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. "Will you? Because this isn't about being more careful. This isn't about thinking before you speak. This is about the fact that you don't see anything wrong with what you've been doing. Even now, you're not apologizing for hurting me. You're apologizing for my reaction to being hurt." The distinction was so subtle, so precise, that it took my breath away. Because he was right. I was sorry that he was upset, sorry that things had gotten awkward, sorry that his family was involved. But was I sorry for the actual words I'd spoken? The truth was, I wasn't sure. "I need time to think," he said, "and you need time to decide what kind of person you want to be, what kind of wife you want to be. And if I decide I want to be better, if I promise to change." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, hope maybe, or the ghost of the love we used to share. "Then we'll see," he said quietly. "But Vireya, the next move is yours, and it better be a good one." After he left, I sat on our couch in the growing darkness, my mind racing. 23 incidents. Had I really been that bad? Had I really hurt him that many times without realizing it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my social media posts, looking for evidence of what? Love? Respect? Kindness toward the man I'd promised to honor and cherish? What I found instead made my stomach turn. Post after post of gentle mockery disguised as humor. Stories about Rowan's quirks, his mistakes, his shortcomings. Photos of him looking uncomfortable while I laughed at some joke he wasn't in on. Comments from friends praising my honesty and authenticity, never realizing they were applauding cruelty. When had I become this person? When had love turned into a blood sport where I was the only one holding weapons? I was still sitting there, phone in hand, when I heard Rowan's key in the lock at nearly midnight. He moved through the apartment like a ghost, gathering things I hadn't noticed were missing. His good watch, his passport, some important documents from his office. "You came back," I said, hope blooming in my chest. "I forgot some things," he replied without looking at me. "I'll be done in a minute." I watched him work, noting the careful way he avoided our bedroom, the methodical approach to collecting his belongings. This wasn't someone having second thoughts. This was someone executing a plan. "Rowan, please, can we just talk about this?" "We did talk," he said, emerging from his office with a folder of papers. "You made your position very clear." "What position? I never said I wouldn't change." He stopped then, really looking at me for the first time since he'd returned. "You didn't say you would either. You said you'd be more careful. You said you'd think before you spoke. But you never said you were sorry for making me feel worthless in front of the people I love. You never said you understood why that was wrong. You just said you'd try not to get caught next time." The accuracy of his assessment was devastating, because that was exactly what I'd been thinking. Not that I needed to change who I was, but that I needed to be more strategic about when and where I expressed myself. "That's not Vireya." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've spent the last year in therapy trying to understand why my wife's love feels like punishment. I've spent 14 months documenting every time you've made me feel small, hoping I was imagining the pattern. I've spent tonight deciding whether our marriage is worth saving. And I'm still deciding, but I know this. I won't live another day feeling like I have to earn basic respect from the person who's supposed to love me most. So you have a choice to make. You can keep being the person who thinks cruelty is funny, or you can become someone capable of loving me the way I deserve to be loved. But you can't do both." He headed for the door again, and this time I didn't follow. I sat frozen on the couch, his words echoing in my head like a verdict. After he left, I stayed awake all night, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how I'd become the villain in my own love story. Somewhere in the early hours of morning, I fell into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of laughter that sounded like breaking glass. I woke up to an empty house and a note on the kitchen counter, written in Rowan's precise handwriting. Filed this morning. Process server will find you. Don't contact my family. Next to the note was his house key, his wedding ring, and a business card for Bradley and Associates, family law. The wedding photo that had sat on our mantel for 3 years was gone, leaving behind only a clean rectangle of unfaded wood and the echo of promises I'd apparently forgotten how to keep. The glass-walled lobby of Morrison Marketing had always been my favorite part of the office. I loved the way it showcased our success to potential clients, the way the morning light streamed through those floor-to-ceiling windows, the way everyone could see me arriving each day in my carefully curated outfits. That Wednesday morning, as I walked through those doors in my best power suit, I felt like I was reclaiming my narrative. I'd spent Tuesday in a haze of disbelief, calling Rowan's phone and getting voicemail, driving past his parents' house and seeing his car in their driveway, trying to convince myself that this was all some elaborate bluff designed to make me appreciate him more. By Wednesday morning, I decided that the best strategy was to act normal, to show everyone, including Rowan, that I wasn't falling apart over some temporary marital drama. I'd even posted a cryptic Instagram story that morning. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who try to change you the most. Stay true to yourself. Authentic, biark no compromise. The responses had been immediate and supportive. Jasper had been the first to comment, "Don't let anyone dim your light. You're perfect exactly as you are." I was riding that wave of validation as I approached the reception desk, already mentally planning my day. I had a client presentation at 10, lunch with the senior partners at noon, and a strategy meeting that could determine whether I got the promotion I'd been working toward for 18 months. That's when I saw him, a man in a cheap suit standing near the security desk, holding a manila envelope and checking something on his phone. He looked up as I approached, and I felt the first flutter of unease. "Vireya Lintott?" he asked, his voice carrying across the lobby's marble floors. "Yes? You've been served." The words seemed to echo off the glass walls as he handed me the envelope. I could feel eyes turning toward us, could see my colleagues pausing in their morning routines to watch the drama unfold. The lobby that had always made me feel powerful now felt like a fishbowl, and I was the main attraction. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Divorce petition and supporting documents," the man said with professional indifference. "Have a good day, ma'am." He walked away, leaving me standing there with the envelope in my hands and what felt like half the company watching. Through the glass walls, I could see people in the adjacent conference room craning their necks to get a better view. Someone was definitely recording this on their phone. I forced a smile and headed for the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble with what sounded like gunshots in the sudden silence. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like it lasted hours, and when the doors finally opened, I practically sprinted to my office. Once safely behind my closed door, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The petition itself was standard legal language, but it was the exhibits that made my blood run cold. 23 separate incidents, each documented with the precision of a criminal investigation. Audio files with timestamps, witness statements from his family members, screenshots of my social media posts with dates and engagement metrics. And there, marked as Exhibit W, was my Instagram story from Sunday night. The one where I'd captioned the dinner photo, keeping hubby humble, or marriage humor, or real wife. Except now, instead of looking cute and relatable, it looked cruel and calculated. The timestamp showed I'd posted it just 2 hours after the dinner, while Rowan was still processing the humiliation I'd put him through. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the witness statements. Lucille's was the worst. Over the past 2 years, we've watched our son diminish under constant criticism disguised as humor. The woman who once brought out his confidence has systematically destroyed it, always with a smile and always with an audience. Peter's statement was shorter, but no less damning. No man should have to endure public mockery from his wife. What we witnessed at Sunday dinner was not playful teasing, it was emotional abuse. Even worse were the statements from Rowan's siblings. Emma had written, "Vireya seems to take pleasure in making Rowan look foolish in front of others. She's turned family gatherings into performances where she's the star and he's the punchline." David had been more direct. "I've watched my brother's self-esteem erode over the past year. He used to be confident, funny, outgoing. Now he barely speaks at family events. And when he does, he seems to be bracing for Vireya's next joke at his expense." But it was Maya's inclusion in the documents that really broke my heart. Not a statement, she was too young for that, but a drawing she'd made in art therapy. The therapist's note explained that Maya had been asked to draw her family, and she'd depicted herself and Rowan with smiling faces, while I was shown with my mouth open and angry lines radiating from my figure. When asked about it, Maya had said, "Mommy talks loud and makes Daddy sad." My 7-year-old stepdaughter had seen what I'd been blind to. She'd watched me hurt her father and documented it in crayon and construction paper. A knock on my door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Come in," I called, quickly shoving the papers back into the envelope. It was Jennifer Walsh, our HR director, and her expression was not encouraging. "Vireya, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "I've received some concerning information about your social media activity." My stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" "Screenshots of posts where you've made disparaging comments about your husband, including references to his workplace and professional capabilities. We've also had colleagues come forward saying you've been openly mocking him during work hours, including in client-facing situations." I thought about Sarah from accounting, about all the conversations where I'd shared funny stories about Rowan's quirks and failures. I'd thought I was being relatable, building rapport with my co-workers. Now I realized I'd been building a case against myself. "Jennifer, those posts were they were personal. They were humor. Everyone knows I love my husband." "Do they?" Jennifer's expression was skeptical, because what I'm seeing here suggests a pattern of public humiliation that reflects poorly on your judgment and professionalism. We've had clients ask about your marriage problems based on your social media presence. That's not the image we want associated with our firm. She placed a formal letter on my desk. "This is an official warning regarding inappropriate social media use and unprofessional conduct. Any further incidents will result in immediate termination. The promotion review you were scheduled for next month has been postponed indefinitely." After she left, I sat in my office, staring at the letter, feeling my carefully constructed world crumbling around me. The promotion I'd worked so hard for, the respect of my colleagues, the support of my family, it was all slipping away because of a few harmless jokes. Or were they harmless? For the first time, I tried to see my behavior through other people's eyes. The constant stream of posts mocking Rowan's cooking, his fashion choices, his hobbies. The stories I'd told at office parties about his adorable incompetence. The way I'd turned our marriage into entertainment for others, with him as the unwitting comedian and me as the clever narrator. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Honey, Rowan's mother called me. We need to talk. Can you come over tonight?" Then another from my father. "Your mother is very upset. Whatever's going on between you and Rowan, you need to fix it. This isn't who we raised you to be." Even my own parents were questioning me. The people who had always supported me unconditionally, who had praised my wit and independence, were now taking Rowan's side. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of work while my personal life imploded around me. The client presentation was a disaster. I was too distracted to focus, and I could see the confusion in their faces when I stumbled over basic talking points. The lunch with senior partners was cancelled when Jennifer informed them of my personal situation. The strategy meeting was postponed indefinitely. By 5 o'clock, I felt like I was drowning. I drove to my parents' house in Westfield, hoping for some sympathy and support, but what I found instead was an intervention. Both my parents were waiting in the living room, along with my sister Rachel, who had driven up from Philadelphia. The formal arrangement of furniture, the serious expressions on their faces, it all felt like a tribunal. "Sit down, Vireya," my mother said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to discuss your behavior." "My behavior?" "Mom, Rowan is the one who filed for divorce over a simple misunderstanding." "Stop." My father's voice cut through my explanation like a blade. "We've seen the evidence, honey. Lucille shared some of it with us. The audio recordings, the social media posts, the timeline of incidents. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern of cruelty." Rachel leaned forward, her expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Vireya, I've been watching your posts for months and I kept thinking, this isn't my sister. This isn't the woman who used to defend the underdog, who stood up for people who couldn't defend themselves. When did you become someone who punches down?" "I wasn't punching down. I was just being honest about marriage. Everyone pretends it's perfect, but I was showing the reality." "Whose reality?" my mother interrupted. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been using your husband as a punching bag for your own insecurities, and you've been doing it publicly to maximize his humiliation." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not... I would never... Wouldn't you?" Rachel pulled out her phone and began reading. "Rowan tried to fix the garbage disposal today. Emphasis on tried. I guess YouTube University doesn't offer advanced degrees. That's from 3 weeks ago. 47 likes, 12 comments making fun of him." She scrolled to another post. "Date night with the husband. He chose the restaurant. I chose to bring antacids." 2 weeks ago, 63 likes, 28 comments about how relatable your husband's poor taste is. "And this one," my mother said, taking the phone. "Rowan's cooking dinner tonight. I've already ordered pizza as backup. Married life, harder blessed with optimism." 89 likes and a comment thread where your friends spend 20 minutes roasting a man they've never met. Each post, read back to me in my family's disappointed voices, sounded worse than I remembered. What had seemed like harmless humor in the moment now felt like systematic character assassination. "I didn't mean for it to sound so harsh," I said weakly. "Intent doesn't matter when the impact is this devastating," my father said. "Vireya, that man has been nothing but good to you. He helped you through your job transition, supported you through your mother's surgery, took on Maya as his own daughter without hesitation. And this is how you repay him, by turning him into a joke for internet strangers. But everyone does this. Everyone complains about their spouse online. It's normal." "No," Rachel said firmly. "Everyone doesn't do this. Some people share funny stories with love and affection. Some people celebrate their partner's quirks. But what you've been doing is different. You've been systematically tearing down a good man for likes and attention, and you've been doing it so consistently that it's become your brand." My mother stood up and walked to the window, her shoulders tense with disappointment. "Lucille played us one of those audio recordings," she said without turning around. "The one from Sunday dinner. Hearing your voice, the tone you used. I didn't recognize you, Vireya. You sounded like someone I wouldn't want to know." The room fell silent except for the tick of the mantel clock and the distant sound of traffic. I sat there, surrounded by my family's disappointment, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what I'd done. "What do I do?" I whispered. "You figure out how to become someone worthy of forgiveness," my father said. "And you do it fast, because that man won't wait forever. Good people don't have to tolerate abuse, even from people they love. I drove home in silence, my family's words echoing in my head. For the first time since this all began, I was starting to see myself clearly, and what I saw terrified me. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 a.m., just 5 days after that disastrous Sunday dinner that had started this avalanche. I'd spent Thursday night preparing with my hastily hired attorney, Marcus Chen, a family law specialist who'd agreed to take my case on short notice. The key is to show remorse without admitting fault, Marcus had advised. Acknowledge that your humor may have been misunderstood, but don't accept responsibility for emotional abuse. We can frame this as a communication issue rather than a pattern of deliberate cruelty. I'd nodded along, grateful for his strategic thinking, but deep down I was still clinging to the hope that once a judge heard the full context, saw that these were just jokes between spouses, that Rowan was being overly sensitive, this whole nightmare would be dismissed as the overreaction it clearly was. The courthouse was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. Rowan sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, Tom Bradley, a silver-haired man who looked like he'd been handling divorce cases since before I was born. Rowan himself looked different, more confident than I'd seen him in months, like he'd finally found solid ground after years of shifting sand. Behind him sat his entire family, Lucille and Peter in the front row, his 3 siblings and their spouses filling the rest of the bench. Even his grandmother had come, her walker positioned carefully beside her seat. They looked like a unified front, all dressed in their Sunday best, all wearing expressions of quiet determination. My side of the courtroom was notably emptier. Just my parents and Rachel, who had driven up again from Philadelphia. Even Jasper, who had been so supportive of my authenticity over the past months, had suddenly become unavailable when I'd asked him to testify as a character witness. Judge Patricia Holbrook entered at exactly 9 a.m., a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made you want to sit up straighter. She reviewed the case file briefly before looking up at both legal teams. This is a motion for emergency temporary orders in the matter of Lintott versus Lintott, she said. Mr. Bradley, you may proceed. Tom Bradley stood with the fluid grace of a man who'd done this thousands of times. Your Honor, my client is seeking temporary orders for separation of assets, spousal support, and custody arrangements based on a documented pattern of emotional abuse spanning 14 months. We have extensive evidence of the respondent's systematic campaign to humiliate and belittle my client, including audio recordings, social media posts, and witness testimony. Objection, Your Honor, Marcus interjected. The petitioner is characterizing normal marital communication as abuse. These are simply instances of spousal humor that have been taken out of context. Judge Holbrook raised an eyebrow. I'll determine what constitutes abuse, Counselor. Mr. Bradley, please present your evidence. What followed was the most humiliating hour of my life. Tom Bradley began with the timeline, 23 incidents over 14 months, each one meticulously documented with dates, times, locations, and witness lists. He presented screenshots of my social media posts, arranged chronologically, to show an escalating pattern of public mockery. As you can see, Your Honor, the respondent's behavior has become increasingly bold and cruel over time. What began as occasional teasing has evolved into a systematic campaign of public humiliation. But it was the audio recordings that destroyed me. Your Honor, I'd like to play Exhibit M, recorded at the family's Christmas party on December 15th of last year. The courtroom filled with the sound of my own voice, tinny through the speakers but unmistakably cruel. Oh God, everyone look at Rowan trying to dance. I think he's having some kind of medical emergency. Should someone call 911? The recording captured the nervous laughter from the crowd, someone trying to change the subject, and then Rowan's quiet voice. I think I'll sit this one out. And here's my personal favorite, Tom continued. Exhibit R, from the Henderson's barbecue last July. This time, it was my voice explaining to a group of neighbors why I'd brought a children's cookbook as a gift for Rowan. I figured he should start with the basics before attempting anything too ambitious. Baby steps, you know. We don't want anyone getting food poisoning. More nervous laughter, someone clearing their throat uncomfortably, and then Rowan again. I'll go check on the drinks. But the worst was yet to come. And finally, Your Honor, Exhibit W, the audio from this past Sunday's family dinner, the incident that prompted my client to finally seek legal protection. The recording quality was crystal clear. Rowan's pen recorder had captured every word, every inflection, every uncomfortable silence. My voice filled the courtroom, dripping with condescension. Oh yes, our little Rowan finally catching up to where he should have been years ago. I have to admit, I was surprised they gave him that much responsibility. But I guess everyone grows up eventually, right? The silence that followed was deafening. 13 seconds of absolute quiet, broken only by the clink of silverware and someone's sharp intake of breath. Then Jasper's voice. Vireya always keeps it real. Most wives just pretend everything's perfect. But nobody laughed. Nobody agreed. The recording captured every uncomfortable throat clearing, every nervous cough, every attempt to change the subject. It captured Maya's small voice asking, "Why is everyone quiet?" And Lucille's gentle response, "Eat your dinner, sweetheart." When the audio ended, the courtroom was dead silent. Judge Holbrook's expression had hardened into something approaching disgust. "Mr. Chen," she said, "does your client dispute the authenticity of these recordings?" Marcus looked at me helplessly. We both knew the recordings were real. Rowan's documentation was too thorough, too precise to challenge. "No, Your Honor, but we maintain that these represent isolated incidents taken out of context." "Isolated?" Judge Holbrook interrupted. "Counselor, I count 23 separate incidents over 14 months. That's not isolated. That's a pattern." Tom Bradley stood again. "Your Honor, we also have the respondent's own social media posts, posted after these incidents, showing a complete lack of remorse. In fact, Exhibit W shows her bragging about Sunday's incident just hours after it occurred. The screenshot of my Instagram story appeared on the courtroom's display screen, enlarged for everyone to see. The photo of the dinner table, smiling faces all around, and my caption, "Keeping hubby humble, yes marriage humor, it's real wife." This was posted at 11:47 p.m. on Sunday night, Tom explained, less than 3 hours after she had publicly humiliated my client in front of his entire family. Rather than showing any awareness of the pain she'd caused, she chose to celebrate it online. The likes and comments were visible too, dozens of people praising my honesty and authenticity, friends making jokes about their own husbands, strangers sharing their own stories of marital mockery. What had seemed like validation at the time now looked like a mob of enablers cheering on cruelty. Judge Holbrook studied the screenshot for a long moment. "Mrs. Lintott, do you have anything to say about this?" I stood on shaking legs, my prepared speech evaporating under her stern gaze. "Your Honor, I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just being myself. I was just trying to be honest about marriage, to show that it's not always perfect. By humiliating your husband in front of his family. It wasn't supposed to be humiliating. It was supposed to be funny. Everyone knows I love him." "Do they?" Judge Holbrook's voice was sharp. "Because what I'm seeing here suggests that everyone knows you enjoy making him look foolish. There's a difference." I felt tears starting to form, but I forced them back. "I can change. I can do better. I just need another chance. Mrs. Lintott, the time for change was 14 months ago when this pattern began. The time for doing better was before you turned your marriage into a public performance with your husband as the unwilling comedian." She turned to the witness statements, flipping through pages of testimony from Rowan's family members. I have statements here from 8 different witnesses describing incidents where you've publicly mocked, belittled, or humiliated your husband. These aren't strangers, Mrs. Lintott. These are people who love both of you, and they're all saying the same thing, that your behavior has become cruel and unacceptable. Tom Bradley presented the final piece of evidence. Maya's drawing from art therapy, the one where she'd depicted me with an angry face and harsh lines radiating outward. Your Honor, even the child has been affected by this pattern of abuse. She's been in therapy for 3 months, trying to process the tension and conflict she's witnessed at home. The drawing was displayed on the screen, and I felt something break inside me. Maya's innocent artwork, her 7-year-old perspective on our family dynamics, was more damning than any legal document. She'd seen what I'd been blind to, that my words were weapons, and Rowan was my target. Judge Holbrook set down the papers and looked directly at me. Mrs. Lintott, in 22 years on this bench, I've seen many forms of domestic abuse. Physical violence is obvious, but emotional abuse can be just as devastating. What you've done to your husband, this systematic campaign of public humiliation, constitutes emotional abuse under the laws of this state. The words hit me like a physical blow. Abuse. I was an abuser. The temporary orders are granted, Judge Holbrook continued. Mr. Lintott is awarded temporary custody of the minor child with supervised visitation for Mrs. Lintott pending completion of anger management and family counseling. Temporary spousal support is denied. Mrs. Lintott will vacate the marital residence within 30 days. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder, and my world officially ended. As the courtroom cleared, I sat frozen in my chair, watching Rowan embrace his family. His mother was crying, tears of relief, not sadness. His father shook his hand like he was congratulating him on a victory, because that's what this was, a victory over the person who had been systematically destroying him for over a year. I was that person. I was the villain in this story, and I'd been too blind to see it. Marcus gathered his papers with the efficiency of a man eager to escape. "We'll appeal, of course," he said, but his tone suggested he thought it was hopeless. Though I have to tell you, this was about as bad as it could have gone. As I walked out of the courthouse, I could feel eyes on me, courthouse staff, other attorneys, random strangers who had wandered in to watch the proceedings. Word was already spreading about the woman who had been so cruel to her husband that a judge had called it abuse. My phone was buzzing with notifications. The story was already online. Someone had live-tweeted the hearing, complete with quotes from the audio recordings and photos of my Instagram posts. The comments were brutal. "This woman is disgusting. That poor man." Imagine being married to someone who thinks destroying your self-esteem is funny. She got what she deserved. Finally, a judge who recognizes emotional abuse. I turned off my phone and drove home in silence, but when I pulled into our apartment complex, I found a small crowd of neighbors gathered near the mailboxes. They scattered when they saw me, but not before I caught their expressions: disgust, pity, and something that looked like fear. I was no longer Vireya Lintott, the witty marketing coordinator with the authentic social media presence. I was Vireya Lintott, the woman who had been legally declared an emotional abuser, the woman who had lost her husband, her stepdaughter, her job prospects, and her reputation in the span of 1 week. And the worst part was, I was finally starting to understand that I deserved every bit of it. The final 30 days passed like a slow-motion car crash. Each morning brought new humiliations, fresh evidence of how completely my life had unraveled. The courthouse hearing had been recorded, and excerpts were making rounds on social media, turning me into a cautionary tale about toxic relationships and emotional abuse. My Instagram following, once a source of pride, became a liability. Instead of the supportive comments I'd grown accustomed to, my posts were flooded with criticism from strangers who'd heard about the case. People were screenshotting my old posts and reposting them with commentary about the cruelty hidden behind my humor. The post about keeping Rowan humble had been shared thousands of times, usually with captions like, "This is what emotional abuse looks like," or "Imagine being married to this." Work became unbearable. Jennifer had made it clear that my position was under review, and my colleagues treated me like I was radioactive. The promotion I'd worked toward for 18 months was officially off the table, and there were whispers about restructuring my department. Sarah from accounting, who had once praised my authenticity, now avoided eye contact in the hallways. Even worse was the isolation from my social circle. Friends who had encouraged my honest posts about marriage were suddenly unavailable for coffee dates or girls' nights. Group chats went silent when I joined them. Invitations to parties and gatherings stopped arriving. It was as if I'd been erased from my own life. Jasper, my former confidant and cheerleader, had disappeared entirely. The man who had encouraged me to keep it real and praised my willingness to call out Rowan's shortcomings was nowhere to be found when I needed support. His social media showed him at various events and gatherings, the same social circles I'd been excluded from, always with a new woman on his arm, always looking like he'd never known me at all. The apartment felt like a mausoleum. Rowan had returned twice to collect more belongings, always with his brother David as a witness, always with the cold efficiency of someone completing an unpleasant task. He'd taken his books, his cooking equipment, his photographs, all the little things that had made our place feel like home. What remained was just furniture and the echo of better times. Maya's room was the worst. Her drawings were gone from the refrigerator, her toys cleared from the living room, her little shoes absent from the entryway. The supervised visits were scheduled for Saturday afternoons at a family counseling center, clinical and cold compared to the easy affection we'd once shared. She was polite but distant, answering my questions with the careful politeness of a child who'd been coached to be respectful but not warm. "Did you have fun at school this week?" I'd ask. "Yes, ma'am." "What did you learn in art class?" "We painted flowers." "That sounds nice. Did you paint one for Daddy?" "Yes, ma'am." She never asked to paint one for me. My parents had maintained contact, but even they seemed to be struggling with how to support me. My mother's phone calls were stilted and brief, full of careful questions about my progress and gentle suggestions about therapy. My father, who had always been my champion, could barely look at me during our weekly dinners. Rachel had returned to Philadelphia and stayed there, citing work obligations that we all knew were excuses. The therapy sessions Judge Holbrook had mandated were brutal in their own way. Dr. Sarah Martinez, ironically, the same therapist Rowan had been seeing for his anxiety, forced me to confront the reality of what I'd done with a directness that left me raw and shaken after every session. "Tell me about the Instagram post," she'd say, "the one you made after Sunday dinner." I was processing. I was sharing my experience. Whose experience? Because from what I can see, you shared your experience of humiliating your husband, but you didn't share his experience of being humiliated. You made him the punchline of a joke he wasn't in on. I didn't think of it that way. Why not? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Why hadn't I thought of it that way? Why had I been so focused on my own entertainment, my own social media engagement, that I'd never considered how my words affected the person I claimed to love most? "I guess I thought he could handle it," I finally said. "I thought he knew I didn't mean anything by it." Did he know that? Because according to his therapy records, he's been struggling with depression and anxiety for over a year. He's been taking medication for panic attacks that started around the time your social media posts about him became more frequent. Did you know any of that? I didn't. I hadn't known about the medication, the therapy, the panic attacks. I'd been so focused on my own performance that I'd missed the signs of my husband's deteriorating mental health. How could I not have seen it? I asked, more to myself than to Dr. Martinez. Because you weren't looking, she replied simply. You were too busy crafting your next joke to notice that your target was bleeding. The truth of it was devastating. I had been so invested in my image as the funny, authentic wife who kept it real that I'd stopped seeing Rowan as a person with feelings and started seeing him as material for content creation. 3 weeks into my 30-day eviction period, I got a call from Tom Bradley, Rowan's attorney. Mrs. Lintott, I'm calling to inform you that my client is prepared to discuss settlement terms for the divorce proceedings. Settlement, I thought. I hoped we might try counseling. Work things out. There was a long pause. Mrs. Lintott, my client has been very clear that the marriage is over. The question now is how to divide assets and arrange ongoing custody with Maya. The finality in his voice was unmistakable. Rowan wasn't interested in reconciliation. He wasn't waiting for me to change or grow or become a better person. He was done. What are his terms? He's willing to split the marital assets 50-50, despite having grounds for a more favorable arrangement given the fault-based nature of the divorce. He'll take primary custody of Maya, with supervised visitation for you until you complete a year of therapy and anger management. He's not seeking alimony, and he's not asking you to pay child support. The generosity of the offer was stunning, especially considering how badly I'd treated him. Even in divorce, Rowan was being more kind to me than I'd been to him during our marriage. There is one condition, Tom continued. You agree to remove all social media posts that reference him or Maya, and you agree not to discuss the marriage or divorce publicly. No interviews, no blog posts, no social media content about the relationship. Complete social media silence about the family. It was a reasonable request, but it felt like losing my voice entirely. My online presence had been built on sharing my authentic relationship experiences. Without that content, who was I? I need time to think about it, I said. You have 48 hours. After that, we proceed to full litigation, and I can't guarantee the terms will be as favorable. That night, I sat in the empty apartment scrolling through my social media history. 2 years of posts about Rowan, hundreds of photos and stories and jokes at his expense. The pattern was so clear now, so obviously cruel, that I couldn't understand how I'd been blind to it for so long. There was the post about his cooking. Rowan's attempt at beef stew. I've already ordered Chinese food as backup. Married life, or new realistic expectations. The one about his fashion sense. Husband thinks this outfit works for date night. I think he's colorblind. Should I tell him or just pretend not to know him? Married to that. Anne, send help. The video of him struggling to assemble Maya's new bookshelf. 2 hours in and we have this. I'm starting to think the instructions are in a language he doesn't speak. DIY fail. Dars bless his heart. Each post had dozens of likes, comments from friends and strangers alike joining in the mockery. I'd built a community around making fun of my husband, and he'd endured it all with quiet dignity while slowly falling apart inside. The next morning brought the final blow. An envelope was slipped under my door while I was in the shower. Not served by a process server this time, just quietly delivered like a newspaper or a pizza menu. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the court's official seal. Final divorce decree. Case number 2024 DR 8847. Lintott v. Lintott. It was over. Officially, legally, completely over. The decree included all the terms Tom Bradley had outlined, plus a few additional details I hadn't expected. Rowan was keeping the apartment. He'd been the one paying the mortgage anyway. And Maya needed stability. I had 30 days to find new housing. He was keeping Maya's college fund, which he'd been funding entirely on his own. He was even keeping our shared Netflix account, which somehow felt like the final insult. But there was something else in the envelope, a handwritten note in Rowan's careful script. Vireya, I hope someday you understand that this wasn't about revenge. This was about survival. I hope you find a way to be happy that doesn't require making other people small. You have so much to offer the world when you're not trying to tear someone down to build yourself up. I genuinely hope you figure that out. For Maya's sake, if not for your own. Ah. The kindness in his words, even after everything I'd put him through, broke something inside me that had been holding back the full weight of my shame. I sat on the floor of our empty living room and cried for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not tears of self-pity or frustration, but tears of genuine grief for the person I'd become and the family I'd destroyed. Leaving the courthouse with my divorce papers, I saw Rowan and Maya on the steps. He looked healthy, unburdened, thriving without me undermining him. "Daddy got another promotion," Maya announced with careful politeness. "Congratulations, Rowan. You deserve it," I said, meaning it. He studied my face, checking if I was sincere or setting up another punchline. Satisfied, he nodded. "Thank you. We should go. Take care of yourself, Vireya." I watched them walk away, hand in hand. This was healing for them. They were free from the constant cruelty I'd brought. Standing there, I understood what I'd lost. Not just a husband and stepdaughter, but the chance to be part of something beautiful. I'd destroyed my family one joke at a time. The irony, I'd documented our marriage for social media without his consent. He'd documented it for protection. Same result, our private pain became public record. Driving past our first date coffee shop, the bookstore, the park where he proposed, all monuments to my failure. My phone buzzed. Someone tagged me in a post about toxic wives. I turned it off. That chapter was over. I had a new life to build, not to win Rowan back, that ship had sailed, but to become someone better than the woman who thought cruelty was comedy. What remained was someone smaller, humbler, but capable of growth. Not the ending I'd planned, but the ending I'd earned. And maybe, with work, it could become the beginning of something better.